Good afternoon. The next item of business is consideration of Business Motion 18148 in the name of Jamie Hepburn on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau on changes to business. Any member who wishes to speak to the motion should press the Request to Speak button now, and I call on the Minister for Parliamentary Business to move the motion.
Move, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Minister. No member has asked to speak to the motion. Therefore, the question is that motion 18148 be agreed. Are we all agreed? Yes. We are agreed. The next item of business is portfolio questions, and the portfolio this afternoon is education and skills. I would remind members that questions 1 and 5 are grouped together, and that I'll therefore take any supplementaries on these questions after both have been answered. And at question number 1, I call Lorna Slater.
To ask the Scottish Government, in light of the reported significant demand for apprenticeship places from both employers and applicants, what is it doing to increase the number of apprenticeship places available?
Minister Graham Day.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government is investing £185 million this year to support high-quality apprenticeships, aiming to strengthen the skills system and ensure efficient use of public funds. Our approach to proactive contract management allows flexibility to respond to emerging demand aligned with government priorities, and Skills Development Scotland supports providers to maximise opportunities throughout the year. We remain committed to working with employers and industry leaders to reform the skills system. Improving skills planning is key to ensuring that supply is better aligned with the demands of Scotland's economy.
Lorna Slater.
Minister, I also have concerns about the gender pay gap in Scotland's apprentices. Male apprentices are predominantly found in sectors such as construction, engineering, IT and telecommunications, sectors that typically offer higher wages and stronger long-term earning potential. Female apprentices are more likely to be found in social services, health and social care, business and administration and hairdressing and beauty, sectors which generally have lower average pay and fewer opportunities for high-wage progression. What is the Minister doing to close this gap and ensure that apprenticeships are not trapping women in low-paid work?
Minister.
Presiding Officer, Lorna Slater highlights a really important and long-standing issue, one that continues to exercise all of us with a locus and interest in ensuring our young people are supported into rewarding and sustainable careers which best realise their potential. The fact Scotland's Apprentice of the Year, Louise Collins, is a female working in aerospace engineering, hopefully will help us demonstrate to young women that engineering is for them. So too, I believe, will be our plans to weave the recommendation of SAB's Gender Commission into our work in the reform space, including especially on careers. That's the critical element of how we address this. And when I talk about careers, I don't just mean reaching the young people. We need to reach the biggest influence on the careers decisions they make. That's parents and carers. Progress has been made in breaking down the gender barriers, but there remains much work still to be done to address the challenge of attracting more women into engineering and construction, the high-paying sectors that Lorna Slater has identified. But of course, we should also be alive to the fact that in some instances, young men are not being attracted to other professions. That too has to be addressed.
Question number 5, Evelyn Tweed.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what assessment it has made of any regional variability in the availability of apprenticeships.
Minister.
Presiding Officer, Skills Development Scotland have operational responsibility for apprenticeships in Scotland. SDS acknowledges that regional variability in apprenticeship availability is influenced by the geographic distribution and recruitment activity of employers across key sectors of the economy. As apprenticeships are demand-led and aligned with employer needs, the number and type of opportunities naturally differs across regions. To try and manage this, SDS undertakes continuous labour market analysis and produces annual regional skills assessments. These assessments inform the strategic management of apprenticeship starts at both national and regional levels, ensuring alignment with the industry priorities and local economic needs.
Evelyn Tweed.
I thank the Minister for that answer. Stirling constituency covers a vast area. However, the majority of apprenticeships are centred in Stirling City. To ask the Minister how it is engaging with stakeholders to ensure wide availability of apprenticeships, but especially in more rural areas.
Minister.
Officer, a key priority for the Scottish Government is to encourage apprenticeship delivery in island and rural communities. As part of that, we introduced a rural uplift for modern apprenticeship delivery, which is an increased payment to training providers to encourage provision in island and rural areas. In addition, travel and subsistence, including accommodation funding, is also available to support apprenticeships where they have to attend formal off-the-job training out with normal daily travel requirements, where this is required as part of the MA framework. The member's constituency is, of course, home to one of the most celebrated of rural apprenticeship successes in the shape of Mark Ingram, who works at Webb Drummond Smiddy. Mark, an amazing young man whose journey highlights the incredible transformative impact an apprenticeship can have on lives, was of course the 2024 Scottish Apprentice of the Year.
I have received requests from 3 members for supplementaries. I intend to take all 3. Supplementary, Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. There remain concerns that some schools are allegedly advise as many young people as possible to go to university. Even an apprenticeship or graduate apprenticeship would provide better prospects. Given the chronic shortage of construction and engineering workers, for example, can the Minister advise as to what steps have been taken in partnership with schools to encourage more young people to take up an apprenticeship?
Minister.
Presiding Officer, there is no doubt that the problem Kenny Gibson highlights does exist. I've visited many schools where the culture is very much as we would want it to be in terms of promoting the full range of career paths, but that is not always the case, as I've heard directly from young people. What I would say to Kenny Gibson is that the work that's underway in the career space through the Careers Collaborative is designed to try and ensure that in all of our education settings, and I don't just mean schools, I mean colleges and universities as well, there is a full and complete offering to young people around the opportunities that they would have to pursue careers. Kenny Gibson specifically mentions construction. We do have an issue around construction. There is, for example, a disconnect between the number of young people who are going to college to do construction-related courses, who are then going into construction as a sector. So I just offer him the reassurance that this is something we're very much alive to.
Supplementary, Stephen Kerr.
And on the same theme, yesterday, Alan Wilson of Scotland's electrical trade body Select warned that, in his words, Scotland absolutely must not be left behind when it comes to apprenticeship funding. That's how he feels. He highlights the emergence of a two-tier system. Funding, for example, for electrical apprentices in England stands at £23,000, and in Scotland it's £8,000, so that's 3 times more. And so he's right to say that we need electricians here and now, and we'll need electricians in the future, and that a two-tier system is totally unacceptable. So with a 30% real terms cut over 7 years, that's his calculation, and no increase in funding in that time, does the Minister accept that these warnings are real, and will he now act to close this unacceptable gap?
Minister.
Presiding Officer, I'm very much alive to the competing arguments that exist in the post-16 education space for funding. I hear regularly asks for an increase in the payment rates, but I hear asks for increases in all sorts of spend in this area. What we're trying to do through the reform work is to look very closely at the needs of the economy and to prioritise those sectors. As part of that work, we will, in due course, look at the payment rates, but I can't stand here today and say we're suddenly going to magic up a pot of money to address this issue, which I do take on board.
And supplementary, Cara Mochan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Construction apprenticeships are essential and there is demand for these apprenticeships. However, in my own South Scotland area, there are 2 areas we really need to work on. One, linking employer and college providers better together to agree numbers to help meet the skills gap. And secondly, local qualification courses. In rural areas, this is a real barrier, and long distances mean we lose apprentices early on because of the difficulty accessing the courses. So can I ask the Minister what can be done to address these issues?
Minister.
I would always encourage the training providers, whether they be private sector or public sector, to have that relationship with employers and trade bodies to understand demand. But I do have to say gently that one of the issues we have here is an expectation that courses will be provided in every locality when those seeking the courses cannot provide the critical mass to that college, perhaps, or indeed a pipeline that allows the college to create and sustain an offering. Therefore, I would very much encourage an open dialogue between those sectors and the local colleges in particular, but it has to be a realistic starting point in this, which is they need numbers in order to create and sustain the courses.
I note at question number 2 that the member is not here, so I would expect an explanation and an apology. And at question number 3, I call Katie Clark.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what it plans to do to ensure that children in care are not excluded from school, as set out in the promise.
Minister.
Presiding Officer, schools and local authorities need to do all they can to ensure children and young people are included, engaged and involved in their education. Over £60 million has been provided to local authorities through the Care Experienced Children and Young People Fund as part of the Scottish Attainment Challenge, and we are working with Education Scotland and local government to improve the educational outcomes of care experienced children and young people. The Government also continues to provide £100,000 of annual funding to Celsius to support the facilitation of the virtual school head teacher network, which is playing a key role in reducing exclusions. Our national policy on exclusion has a strong focus on approaches that can be used to prevent the need for exclusion. Exclusion should be the last resort, and when used should be a proportionate response where there is no appropriate alternative.
Katie Clark.
Can the Minister outline how he believes it will be possible to address ongoing exclusions from school of care experienced children, given the harm it does to their lives? Does he believe that a legislative solution in the Government's Promise Bill will be possible, or does he believe there are other strategies which will be effective?
Minister.
Well, first of all, can I note Katie Clark's long-standing interest? I know she's raised this in the Chamber previously. The Scottish Government has been working in close partnership with Education Scotland and partners, including ARIS and COSLA, to consider the calls for action made by the Promise. This has resulted in the development of the Promise in Education framework, which seeks to support the improvement of the educational outcomes of care experienced children and young people, and that includes reducing exclusions. All of this is aligned with the asks made in the Promise, but before the framework was further developed, however, it was put to a test in local authority settings. Now, initial feedback from the local authorities was largely positive, but there is further testing to be done. And I would expect that the findings of the recent Who Cares report, which were quite concerning, will provide fresh impetus to the work that's going on in the exclusion space. It's also the case that a review of national guidance on exclusions gets underway later this summer, and I'm sure the intersection with care experienced children will feature prominently in that activity.
Supplementary, Ross McCall.
Thank you. The Minister mentions the Who Cares Scotland report, and it is deeply concerning given the promised to end the practice. With care experienced children nearly 6 times more likely to face exclusion than their peers, and the fact that extremely limited timetables are being used as a route to avoid a formal exclusion is unacceptable, especially as it begets non-attendance, increases stigma and enhances mental health issues. Now, the Promise Oversight Board, in their report for 25, stated school exclusions, reduced timetables and non-attendance can be interlinked, and data sets must be connected to give a clearer picture of what young people need to thrive. So, Minister, is the Scottish Government collating this interlinked data? If so, when will it publish it? And if not, what steps is it taking to facilitate that important information? Minister.
Well, the member will, I hope, recognise that this is not my particular area of responsibility, so I will ask the relevant Minister to write back to her. But I'm quite pleased to hear that she's concerned about exclusions, because we regularly hear from those benches seemingly a demand for greater exclusions. So there does seem to be a slight disconnect in the Conservatives' positioning on this. However, she does make a fair point, and I will ask the Minister to write back to her.
And supplementary, Willie Rennie.
The reports of 15-minute timetables, 15 minutes per day to avoid a formal exclusion, is just tokenistic. And third sector bodies have been very clear that there are instances in many parts of the country. So without the appropriate wraparound support for the rest of the day, can the Minister provide us with a guarantee that this will be thoroughly investigated to make sure that care experienced young people are getting the support, the educational support that they deserve? Minister.
I say to Mr Rennie that the Chief Inspector is currently looking at this issue, and the Cabinet Secretary is well aware of the problems that have been highlighted, and we will undertake to return to Mr Rennie and we'll write to him with a further update on what's happening.
Question number 4 has not been lodged. I call question number 6. Ben McPherson.
To ask the Scottish Government what assessment it has made of the impact of holiday hub provision for children with disabilities and additional support needs in the City of Edinburgh and elsewhere in Scotland.
Cabinet Secretary.
We've published a series of national evaluations on the impact of school holiday activities and childcare. These evaluations show positive impacts for both children and their families, including improved confidence and skills development. Reports also highlight that it is important for services to be inclusive and delivered by staff with the right skills and experience. I very much recognise that more needs to be done to improve the experiences of disabled children and those with additional support needs. That is why we have invested an additional £1 million this financial year to help support the delivery of holiday play schemes and activity provision for disabled children.
Ben McPherson.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for the answer, and it's good to hear about the evaluations and investment. As Parliament is aware, there has been a notable rise in the number of children identified as having additional support needs in recent years. And it is my understanding that councils have a statutory duty under the Children's Scotland Act 1995 to provide out-of-school and holiday care for children with disabilities and additional support needs. However, a number of parents in my constituency and elsewhere have raised concerns with me that the level of provision available is inadequate to meet their children's needs, a concern that is especially pressing as we approach the school summer holidays. And Councillor Ewan Hislop has been raising this with the City of Edinburgh Council's administration. However, can the Cabinet Secretary say a bit more about how it is considering the issue nationally and engaging with councils at this time?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank Mr McPherson for raising what is a hugely important issue. The member quite rightly puts on the record the increase that we have seen in recent years in relation to pupils with an identified additional support need, and part of that relates to the broader definitions that we as a government have taken forward for good reason. However, I do recognise the implications that has in relation to support. In relation to the member's point on local authorities' responsibility, there is a duty on local authorities under Section 27 of the Children's Scotland Act 1995 to provide out-of-school care as is appropriate for children in need. And now that provision might be subject to assessment, but in relation to whether or not out-of-school care is appropriate for a child's particular strengths and needs, that is a matter for the local authority. However, to the member's substantive point, we are beginning to work with partners across local government to better understand the range of approaches that our councils are taking to implement those statutory duties. We're working through an improvement lens, and that's been identifying the opportunities to strengthen existing approaches across local authorities. But to the member's substantive point, I'm more than happy to ask my officials to engage with Edinburgh City Council on the issue that he has raised today.
Supplementary, Miles Briggs.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I associate myself with the comments of Ben McPherson, because I think the way in which the Council have handled this has been totally unacceptable. Parents and families are rightly angry that they've been left in the dark, and this is us now heading into the summer holidays. And children with severe medical complex needs, disabilities and life-limiting conditions should have the right to access holiday hub provision, and there's few opportunities often for them to otherwise participate. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary, what national guidance is the Government developing with councils along this? I didn't hear necessarily that in her answer. And also, does she recognise Edinburgh is finding this difficult as the lowest funded council in Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank Mr Briggs for his question, and he's absolutely right to say that parents should not at this time, particularly in the academic year, being left in the dark in that regard. I gave an undertaking to Mr McPherson. I would ask officials to engage directly with Edinburgh Council to that end. At the current time, as I set out previously, the legal obligation does rest with local authorities. So the member asked about national guidance because of the statutory responsibilities here. It would be a matter for local authorities, but I'm more than happy to speak to officials around about if there is an opportunity for us to look at national guidance to help supplement that more broadly, and to the member's specific point, to press forward with that engagement with Edinburgh City Council and the challenges in that regard. In terms of funding, of course, more broadly, the Government provided additionality to local authorities such as Edinburgh Council through the budget negotiation process. That was a key ask, £29 million for additional support needs, and of course the member's party voted against that.
And supplementary, Martin Whitfield.
I'm very grateful, Deputy Presiding Officer. Further to the answers that the Cabinet Secretary has already given, which I'm grateful for, would not national guidance with regard to the definition of appropriate in Section 27 resolve some of these challenges where there is in essence a postcode lottery that's being applied as to what appropriate means?
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm not going to give Mr Whitfield a definitive answer on that today because, of course, the existing legislation very much speaks to the statutory responsibilities of local authorities, as I've set out to Mr McPherson. I'm happy to take further advice from officials on that in relation to our national potential for looking at guidance to strengthen that, recognising the concerns that have been raised by members quite rightly today.
Question number 7, Michelle Thompson.
to ask the Scottish Government what consideration is given to supporting schools to raise awareness of and provide the required assistance to people with hearing and sight difficulties.
Cabinet Secretary.
The requirements for Teachers Scotland Regulations 2005 require education authorities to ensure that teachers employed to teach hearing and visually impaired pupils hold an appropriate qualification. Work is underway with partners to update the qualifications guidance. This will ensure that education authorities and teaching professionals have clear, up-to-date information on the appropriate qualifications required to support pupils effectively, enhancing the proficiency of this specialist area of the workforce. The Scottish Government also funds the Scottish Sensory Centre and Call Scotland to provide advice and training to school staff, including in the use of assistive technology for pupils with specific and/or complex communication and sensory needs.
Michelle Thompson.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. The most recent census data shows that the number of pupils recorded as having a vision impairment when compared to 2011 has doubled. At the same time, the number of qualified teachers of children and young people with vision impairment has not increased sufficiently, and there's additional concerns have been expressed about the ageing profile of the workforce. So what action is the Scottish Government taking to address this specialist teacher recruitment and training shortage to ensure that blind and partially sighted pupils continue to receive the quality education necessary to reach positive destinations and narrow the attainment gap with their fully sighted peers?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank Michelle Thompson for raising a hugely important issue, and it is worthwhile recounting that under the Additional Support for Learning Act, all teachers have a role in meeting the additional support needs of their pupils, including those with visual impairments. In addition to that, though, specialist teachers who are qualified teachers of children and young people with visual impairments work collaboratively with colleagues in mainstream education settings to meet the individual learning goals of pupils with visual impairments. And in 23-24, 90.2% of mainstream secondary school leavers receiving support for a visual impairment were in a positive destination 9 months after leaving school. But to the member's substantive point, we do recognise the increase in the number of pupils with visual impairments, and that presents obviously challenges for schools. That is why, of course, to the previous question, the Government has prioritised £29 million of additional funding in the 25-26 budget for local and national programmes to support the recruitment, retention and training of the ASN workforce.
Question number 8, Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to tailor funding to colleges to ensure that they are providing courses to meet the needs of businesses in an ever-changing world.
Minister.
So the Scottish Funding Council is, of course, responsible for allocating funding to colleges in line with ministerial priorities as set out in the SFC's annual letter of guidance. Colleges are responsible for determining their own operational decisions, including course provision. I expect colleges to engage with employers and local partners to understand skills needs and to continuously plan and adjust their curriculum to meet the emerging needs of the economy. The Post-School Education and Skills Reform Programme aims to make further improvements. The 2025-26 budget allocates £656.2 million in resource funding to colleges, which is a 2% uplift on 24-25.
Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I thank the Minister for that answer. The North East of Scotland College is adapting to ensure that we have the people to meet the needs of business and the energy transition. Does the Minister share my view that funding to colleges also needs to adapt to recognise the changes that are taking place in order that we meet our net zero ambitions to achieve a just transition and to build a workforce for the future? And does that mean that ministerial priorities and what they say to the Scottish Funding Council also needs to change to meet those needs?
Minister.
NESCO is an excellent example of a college adapting to the net zero transition. It collaborates closely with regional and national employers to meet the needs of the energy transition. To support the sector at large, tailor their courses, the Scottish Funding Council has established a curriculum transformation framework that allows colleges to more flexibly use their funding to respond to local needs and demands. The College Tripartite Alignment Group heard this morning that there's been a fair degree of interest from institutions in taking this opportunity. I would have a hope that an enlightened and forward-looking college like NESCO would be amongst those. On the point about priorities, I should say to Kevin Stewart, I have extensive conversations with colleges, including this morning, and it's clear that there are a large number of colleges are seeking to change their offering and to align it to the changing needs of their local economy, and we will do everything we can to support them to achieve that.
Supplementary, Douglas Ross.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Last week, the Education Committee heard from the University of the Highlands and Islands, and we discussed the top slice that they take from their local colleges, such as Murray. This money accounts to about £15 million every year going into the Central Executive Office, but these colleges have a deficit of about 11 million, so it would make a huge difference to them. What does the Minister think about the future of that top slice from colleges' budgets, and what discussion has he had internally and externally with UHI about it?
Minister.
As the member knows, because we've had an exchange on this before, I've been encouraging UHI on that piece of reform work that they've been doing, driven from the bottom up, because there is a need to ensure that UHI has a sustainable long-term future as a concept, notwithstanding the challenges, financial challenges and other challenges that it has. I'm aware of the exchange that the member had with the principal of UHI at committee on that very subject. I would expect that as part of the work that's going on, and it is taking an extended time to get this right, that they will be looking at how they make best use of the financial resources that are provided them, because I do recognise the criticism that's made in that regard.
And supplementary, Pam Duncan-Clancy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Principal of Glasgow Kelvin College told the Education Committee last week that the college is now having to turn away 2 out of every 3 applicants. That's in Glasgow, a city with high levels of deprivation and employers crying out for skilled workers. The committee also heard that 40% of the college's students come from Scotland's most deprived areas. So can I ask the Minister, why does he think a college in one of our largest cities has been forced to turn away the majority of its applicants? Does he think it's acceptable, and what could he do so that they don't have to do this in the future?
Minister.
Well, as ever, Pam Duncan-Glancy brings problems, never solutions. She's well aware of the challenges. I'm well aware of the college sector's challenges in the City of Glasgow and elsewhere. What I'll say to her is what I said a moment ago about the work that's going on through the Tripartite Alignment Group, of which the Principal of Kelvin College is a member, I should add, to best equip the colleges with the opportunity to tailor their offering to the needs of their student cohort.
Thank you, Minister. Point of order, Alexander Stewart.
Presiding Officer, can I apologise to you in the Chamber for not being here for question 2 for my portfolio question on education and skills?
Thank you, Mr Stewart. Of course, that is not a point of order, but I thank you nonetheless for your apology. There's not really a clarification as to whether it was a lift issue or perhaps a dog eating the homework issue or whatever the issue it was. I would highly recommend to Mr Stewart and indeed to all members in the Chamber that a daily glance at the Scottish Parliament's business bulletin is always a useful thing to do. And with that, I thank the Minister and conclude the portfolio session on education and skills. There will be a short pause before we move on to the next item of business to allow front bench teams to change positions. Thank you.